And we are joined now by one of the top legal analysts in the pro-life movement, Steve Aden, with Americans United for Life. Steve, this is a pretty tough new law, and not many other states in the country allow abortion right up to delivery. Do you see New York becoming a destination for those interested in late-term abortions?
Well, Heather, that may very well happen. Abortion in New York is basically unlimited as of this week, without respect to who does it, because they took the provision out that required that only doctors do abortions. It's paid for in state Medicaid. There's no limit on when you can get one. And the state is doing everything it can to push abortion.
It's really interesting. I want to ask you, because we know that the abortion rate in New York has declined for the last several years. Those are CDC numbers. So how do you explain that in a state where the government and lawmakers are so pro-abortion?
Well, yeah, you wonder what more New York could have done to promote abortion, and yet the numbers, as you said, for abortion keep dropping year by year. I don't think there's been a stop in that decline, at least for the last 10 years. So that is a silver lining, and that's a note to pro-life activists. Keep working, because what you're doing is working, sometimes even in spite of the state laws. New York is in kind of a race to the bottom right now with Illinois, California, principally those three, to become the #1 abortion destination, apparently, in the U.S. But it's odd that nothing has changed since before Roe versus Wade, because before Roe versus Wade, abortion was legal in those states, and people flocked to those states back then. So in part, there isn't much new here. And the silver lining, as I said, is despite all of the pro-abortion policy and law in New York, the numbers keep dropping, and that's a compliment to the very goodwill pro-life activists in that state.
The governor, of course, is saying he wants to cement abortion on demand with a constitutional amendment. Might that really shift things even more, or is that not a big deal at this point?
Well, it would keep future legislatures in New York from becoming pro-life, and that would be very, very regrettable. And that obviously is to be opposed. The best thing, I think, nationally would be a human life amendment, which would do the same thing on the federal level. We may be a few years out from that. I think the first step is to see Roe versus Wade overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, and that may well happen within the next several years. So we are making
Let me
steps.
ask you a little bit more about that, because a lot of people are talking about the Supreme Court right now and whether Judge Kavanaugh will make a difference. Do you see him contributing to the to further eroding Roe v. Wade, or even overturning it, as you were just talking about?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I think that it's appropriate to say at this point there is a 5-4 pro-life majority on the Supreme Court. There are 5 justices who would love to see erosions to Roe versus Wade and perhaps even overturn it. So we've got to keep appropriate cases coming up to the Supreme Court, cases that present strong vehicles for reconsidering or overturning Roe. And we're starting to see that happening. I mean, Indiana has a couple up before the court that have to do with a state provision requiring that human fetal remains that are destroyed in abortion be treated with respect and dignity. That would be a good first step for the Supreme Court to recognize that life in the womb is human life, and human remains ought to be treated with dignity and respect.
All right, well, we have got to leave it there, and I'm sorry, but thank you for your time. A lot to keep on top of. Steve Aden with Americans United for Life.
Thank you, Heather.